trying to escape from the curses I was born to break, finding a way to overcome my fears. I am strong enough. There might be some bumpy roads ahead, but I'm equipped. I've learned some great lessons. The power lies in me. Now I see so clearly. All my steps are destined. I'm going in the right direction. Gotta keep believing in myself. Gotta keep going, don't give up. Yes, I'm gonna see this through. Yeah, I put my trust in you. The only way out is to go within. Now I see you're my best friend. Yes, I finally found my peace. I know that I can trust in me. It's a blessing that I've come this far. 'Cause when you feel alone, I know it can get hard. But I'm choosing gratitude, grace, love, and peace. You're always with me. All my steps are destined. I'm going in the right direction. Gotta keep believing in myself. Gotta keep going, don't give up. Yes, I'm gonna see this through. Yeah, I put my trust in you. The only way out is to go within. Now I see you're my best friend. Yes, I finally found my peace. I know that I can trust in me. I am connected to a love that never runs out. I am connected to a source that never runs out. I am connected to a love that never runs out. I am connected to a source that never runs out. I am connected to a love that never runs out. I am connected to a source that never runs out. I am connected to a love that never runs out. I am connected. I gotta keep believing in myself. Gotta keep going, don't give up. Yes, I'm gonna see this through. Yeah, I put my trust in you. The only way out is to go within. Now I see you're my best friend. I finally found my peace. I know that I can trust in me. Believing in myself. Gotta keep going,
Hey,
don't give up.
what's up?
I'm gonna see this through. Yeah, I put my trust in you. The only way out is to go within. Now I see you're my best friend. Yes, I finally
Wow.
found my peace.
Miss Dolores.
I can trust in me.
Make sure you guys are liking, sharing, loving. Everybody clap. I can't hear you. Yes. Thank you so much for tapping in and tuning in for this Tuesday at 8:30. We still yet holding on out there? Everybody's out there holding on. We have Miss Claudie. Greetings from South Carolina, Miss Ginger. Yes, we have. All right. We have some of our people that are in here. Yes, giving shout out, Miss Dorothy. Oh, thank you so much. That's so sweet. Miss Johnson, I'm connected to a source that never runs out. I love it. Yes, absolutely. That's why I play that, is because One, Bishop loved that song. It was, of course, Majesty Pearson. It is on Snapchat, and you could find that song. I spoke to them today. I was able to be with Julian and Majesty, and we were able to talk a little bit about some foundation stuff. What does that look like? Trying to get it together. You know, it's a lot to take in, as you guys would understand. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to understand. It's a lot to go through, and to be able to move forward in a way that is not losing or leaving, disconnecting from their father and a person that we would consider a spiritual teacher and leader that has spawned up something amongst this community and everyone that's in it. And that is expanding our consciousness, and then also the inclusion, which is beyond what people talk about or what people know. We talk about getting rid of hell. And I got a clip to play for you. I like to play clips, and I like to think of, pull things back that I think that you probably wouldn't be thinking of whenever it comes to Bishop. And so make sure you're liking and sharing this. We know that sometimes people may even forget, but it's here in the archives. If you're watching this in replay, do not forget to still leave comments, right? Still help other people here connect. We have people that are connecting. I just read that someone said since Bishop has transitioned, they haven't been back. And so I understand. I'm sure a lot of you understand. And if you guys are normals that you come back, make sure if you see comments or things of that nature, you can welcome some people in if you haven't seen that name. You can greet some people, or if there's something that someone may say, hey, we're part of a community and you are part of this community. And we are here to give digital hugs. Yes, I did. Yes, absolutely, Mr. Laura, seeing you there. I love it. Keep the comments rolling and coming. I still will read them. And at this time, I would like to transition, and let's go down memory lane. Back when Bishop was he went to a show, Lexi show. I'm pretty sure some of you have seen it, but you probably haven't revisited. This is early in his, not just after his transformation, but more when the media and people start picking up on Bishop and what they was trying to figure out, what in the world is he talking about? In this clip, also, you will see Bishop Bloomer, who has also somewhat embraced Bishop. I'm not sure how much the change, but he has embraced him. He loves him. He's a dear friend, and which is different from what's in this video. And so a lot of people are in this process and have changed and really begin to see things differently. But let's go ahead and take a stroll down memory lane here with Bishop and his interaction on the Lexi show.
Bill Robertson, all these people sit at that table. And I said, I've never been more honored than to have you two Orthodox Islamic men sitting at my table, eating what my wife and I have served you. And of course, I had eaten at their house too. And I wept, and I helped them up, and I hugged their necks and kissed them on both sides of their faces. And I do that with the medicine men. And the Hindu man said, Bishop Pearson, are you telling me that Jesus Christ died for my sin and I'm saved? I said, yes, sir. He said, and what about my wife and my children and my friend there? He said this to me in my son's classroom. I said, yes. He watched her say, for the first time in my life, I believe it. I said, well, I'm not trying to convert you, sir. I just want to convince you of what? That you're loved unconditionally and redeemed to God by Christ. That's it. And then I left the room. I'm preaching the gospel. Y'all ought to be happy, not mad at me, just because I took your hell away from you. And your devotion to hell is almost demonic. See, the devotion to hell, folks. You know,
because you said so many times, you said we always trying to put somebody in hell.
And the devil, we might as well sing, and he walks with me and he talks with me and he tells me I am, because y'all got the devil everywhere. And the more you testify the devil, preach the devil, and elevate the devil, the more the devil manifests in your life. Come to me and I'll cast him out of your thinking. See, you're free and don't know it. You're loosed and delivered and you don't know it. Now, don't let me have to come out there and lay hands on you. You know, you just forgot it. You came here free. You're going to leave here free. But you just forgot it from the womb to the tomb. You forgot who you are and started impersonating who you think people want you to be. Come on back to Jesus.
That was early in his transition. And people still yet did not know how to handle it, what to do with that information. And one thing I will say is, as Bishop began to transition, he began to even transition some of his message within inclusion. He believed in inclusion, but it began to expand even bigger and larger and wider as he began to question some things in Scripture, begins to question Scripture. He began to question all kinds of different things on his spiritual journey. And this evening, what I would like to do is explore spiritual journey. And I have a person, a former bishop, now turned atheist. If you haven't listened recently, Bishop has said that numerous times. And so we're going to actually have a conversation with someone that has had an experience, had a connection to Bishop, has understand his transition. Maybe we can see where he was during that process. And so I have someone here that I'm going to invite to the stage. And you know what? As a dedicated person, it's really, truly amazing that he was needed to go to the emergency room. Yes, he needed to go to the emergency room. And guess where he's at? In the emergency room. But we here today. Welcome to the show, sir.
Malachi, it's a blessing to be here, man. I'm really humbled, and yeah, dedication, man. It's like I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to punt or whether I was going to do the show. And I said, man, you and I have been trying to connect for several months now, and I said, can't put this off anymore. I said I needed to be here.
It's going to work out. It is going to work out. It's going to work out. It's working out. It has already worked out, right? I moved, you know, in a way, I moved from a claim it and name it into more of the understanding and cellular function and who we are. And so, you know, as we begin to change our own life and our own health the best we can through our understanding of ourselves and our minds and our bodies and how powerful that is, you know. So, you know, the first thing I would like to ask you is, of course, the biggest thing is, tell me about one of the things that, whether you were what you remember from Bishop, and did you ever have interaction with Bishop as you were a bishop and brought into the bishopric before your transition? Was that a thing at all?
Well, you know, I met Bishop Pearson before my consecration. It was probably about 5 or 6 years prior to, and I met him here at Tulsa and in the conference that he was leading, and I only got a chance to meet him and shake his hand one time. But as he began his journey, I began to watch his journey, because a lot of the people that I was connected to in ministry, they said, "Hey, you know, stay clear of Carlton Pearson," right? That's what they were saying, and you know, I tried to be faithful to that. But as time moved on, I saw what he was doing, and I saw his boldness, and I saw his bravery, and that inspired me. One of the big things for me was when they did the movie Come Sunday. And I know that that's just scratching the surface, but that really helped me. He said, "I heard from God." And the College of Bishops said, "Are you sure you heard from God?" And I really began to think about that. I said, who is one man or one woman to judge another as to whether or not they've heard from God or not? That was a big challenge and a big change for me. And in the wake of that movie premiering on Netflix, I did a show on YouTube about that movie, and it was my thoughts, my out what came out of me from the movie, and it was my most viewed show on YouTube ever. So that was a huge. I can't really. And let me just say this: that in moving to Tulsa, I got connected with Mike Williams through Henry Harris, and we were trying to get something scheduled so that I would actually meet Bishop. And I also know Steve White. Steve White's an old friend of mine, and we were trying to work this out, but it just the timing just wasn't working. It wasn't there. But I'm happy to say that this man had an extraordinary impact on my life and on my faith journey.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That is beautiful. It's a really good connection to me as we move into where we're going in terms of the present now and the future now, is the fact that I believe that the presence of a person, right? The essence of a person, they still can be around and actually make things. Is like, I think you can know, in other words, I think he knows you, or you could know him, or you guys can connect more now than ever in a heart sense. And in this sense right now,
Sure.
one of the things is your bishop. Tell me about, like, how did you get involved in the church, and what ended up leading you becoming a bishop?
Well, basically, I started a ministry about 33 years ago, and came up the ranks as an ordained minister, then as an associate pastor, then as a senior pastor, and then I was elected to the bishopric and duly consecrated. And once I did that, I went about the job of being a bishop, which I've always likened the position of bishop to a pastor to pastors, no more, no less. Some people think that it's princely or that it's royal and all of that, and I've never thought of it that way. I've always thought of it, I'm a servant to servants. That was the way I looked at it. And so I spent, 14 years in the bishopric, and it was funny that one of the things that really challenged me, especially when I was presiding bishop of ICOF, that there were a lot of churches in third world countries that were paying to be a part of ICOF. And this is not to say anything about ICOF as an organization or anything about the churches in general, but I just thought that really the stronger ought to do more for the weaker instead of vice versa. And that was a beginning of a spiritual shift for me, where I just said, okay, this doesn't really make sense. If I'm the stronger person, if I have more resources, if I have more ability, then the onus is on me to do more for those who cannot. And I just didn't see that. So that was the beginning of my transition. There were other things too, like how women in ministry were being treated, and I don't know if you know Bishop Janine Hyman, powerful woman of God, and she's been a really strong signal among the noise in ministry, but she often gets shunned and she gets relegated to second billing because she's a woman. So one of the things that was another part of my transition was dealing with women in ministry. I thought that women honestly, if you go back and look in the Bible, that the first preacher of the resurrection was a woman, Mary Magdalene. And from then on, the entire first century church wouldn't have been built out the way it was without women. So to deny women leadership and a voice, I thought was very hypocritical of the church. So those were two of the first steps. Those were my baby steps. And then one more before I kick it back to you, Malachi, is the whole concept of finances and the tithe. And I began to look and see where the tithe was never commanded for New Testament saints. And when I began to preach on that, I started getting attacks from all throughout the Orthodox Christian Church, because they were like, you can't say that because you're cutting off the income of the church. You're cutting off the financial legs. Well, no, I'm telling the truth. There is no command to tithe. Now, if you want to give freely, great. But if you, to go back to the book of your namesake, Malachi, that entire chapter, or Malachi 3, was directed to the priesthood and not the people. And that scripture has been horribly abused to hold people under control.
Wouldn't you say tithing too at the time had more to do with taxation? You know, it wasn't like an additional to the church. It was more a taxation, like, and tithing wasn't necessarily money. Wouldn't it be like if you have wheat or if you have goats, you would?
Yeah.
So everybody could eat. So everyone can eat. It was a kind of a taxation. Everybody gets to eat, and we all give so that we could take care of each other, right? Versus it being like
in the storehouse.
Yes. I have a whole philosophy on the principles of give, just real quick. And that is, if you move over to the New Testament and it says give, it will be given, pressed down, shaken together. Like there's a principle of give, right? So if you just give, you know, and shakes it up together as the wheat or flour or whatever it is falls to the ground, you give more, shake it together, and it's just a principle of give. Like, and that's outside the Bible. Right. That is just a principle on or within, to me, the cosmos is the fact that it's gratitude. It's a principle.
Oh, check it out. Look at this. Rockefeller, Chase, Vanderbilt, all of the Ford, all of these families. One of the reasons why they have had perpetual wealth is because they've given. They've set up foundations that give billions of dollars. The principle of giving is a universal principle. It doesn't respect Christians or Muslims or anyone else. That if you give, it'll be given unto you. Generosity pays for itself.
It's so interesting when you look at those different things within the church and the reason why we have the church. Do you have any understanding when it relates to the Bible and to the church and the formulation through colonization and what we have today? Did you ever do any of that study as within the bishop? Just within your not just being a bishop, but within your theological connection and study, where it began to break down at all?
Oh, absolutely. Because if you look at it, colonization was impossible without Christianity. Basically, and you look at the whole thing from Constantine forward, from the Council of Nicaea forward. That the whole thing about deifying Jesus in that context was to ascribe power to the state, and this power was to be able to control and manipulate the population. Now, when you reverse engineer this, and that's something that I did, is I looked at, okay, how did Scripture become? How did it come to be? And what was it used for? And when you look at it, a lot of the text was used as a payload to weaponize the Bible to basically conquer and colonize, and that goes like basically from the Crusades forward. And when I look at what trying to think who it was that said this. God, and I want to say Desmond Tutu, but I'm probably wrong about this. But he said that when Christianity came to Africa, they said, "Close your eyes and let's pray." And when we closed our eyes, we had land and they had Bibles. When we opened our eyes, they had the land and we had Bibles. In other words, the whole model of Christianity was used to basically steal the land of Africa, the land of North America, land of South America. It was used to justify slavery. It's used to justify misogyny against women. It's used for a whole bunch of really nefarious purposes. And when I began to see some of that in my studies, this was an eye opener. And let me say this too, that the presiding bishop over the Council of Nicaea, and I see my man Bishop Jamal Broadnax out there, which he and I have 1 degree of separation in our consecration. But basically, our patron of the patron of our consecration was Bishop Eusebius, and so I began to do some studying on Eusebius, who was the presiding bishop over the Council of Nicaea. And watch this: Eusebius locked all these bishops in the room and told them, "You're not coming out until we have some agreement on these tenets that we're trying to establish to fortify the church." And while Eusebius had all these bishops locked up, he's out there sticking their women. And so these are things that people don't know. And when you understand these things, you say, okay, how much of this is real and how much of it is fabricated? How much of it is really divinely inspired, and how much of it is just there for the purpose of manipulation and control? Those were challenges that I had. I mean, but I've got some more, but I'll get to that in a minute. I'm gonna kick it back over to you, man.
Yes. Hey, we'll just keep it rolling, because the thing is what we want to do is in expanding the consciousness and awareness. It's not just to give people things to clap back at other people whenever they say something, but it's to better equip and get a more full understanding. And so since you've experienced it, because you're going from a bishop into, it's like when we say atheist, and one thing people, I believe you had where you were actually an atheist
Right.
now to atheist. And to me, there's within spirituality, when you're ready to get on the journey and understand that it's a journey. So as you discover, you can discover, but go ahead and continue more into, because where I'm getting at is you're going from where a lot of us has been within the church, and then some of us may have heard bishop, or some of us may had some kind of spiritual experience, and then all of a sudden we had a realization, okay, we understand, but then what happens? Now we need to be better equipped or have more confirmation in our lives and more things to confirm. And part of your story, I think, helps confirm in everyone's lives on, and then plus they can do some research. It's, as you were saying, with the Council on Nicaea, we heard D.E. Polk this past weekend begin to talk about the other Christ-like stories, before Christ.
Krishna, Mithra, Horus, what is there's Hercules, all of these are all characters they had Christ-like attributes.
Kind of intriguing and interesting. And I like what you said also too about the stories, whether some of them being fabricated. Of course, we do know 100% that a lot of the stories were stories. Even Mike Williams talked not too long ago, and he was talking about, is Jesus a lie? Like whenever he was speaking in parables, because the parables weren't true, he was kind of just telling these fairy tales so people can get a concept, which was was very interesting and intriguing. But tell me more in the sense that what gave you confidence in walking in this space that you're in now.
I began to see people like Bishop and Pastor Beckwith in California, people who began to walk away from the Christian orthodoxy and began to speak truth to power. That when, like, for example, Bishop Pearson came out and said, "There's no hell." Now, this is a funny thing, right? Because Satanists don't believe in a literal Satan or literal hell. The only people who believe in a literal Satan and literal hell are Christians. Now, there's something wrong with that, because the thing is that if you believe in what you believe in what's true, and you believe what's good, what's enriching, what's edifying. And when you go back and again, reverse engineering hell, this is a really huge one, because this was someplace that Bishop Pearson had inspired me to look deeper, because when you go back and look through the entire New Testament, that every instance of hell is either Gehenna, which was a trash dump outside of Jerusalem, which had been set on fire, had been burning for 500 years, or Sheol, the place of the dead. Now, this is what's funny. If you think about this, Jesus is preaching to first century Jews, and he's teaching them. Now, if you go back in the Old Testament, there's no reference to hell. You would think that if there was a hell, that God surely would have told Adam and Eve that God surely would have told Noah about that God surely would have told Abraham about that. But you don't find any mention of that. So here's the thing. If Jesus comes and introduces this concept of a place of eternal conscious torment that no one had ever heard of, somebody will be raising their hand and be like, oh, hey, Jesus, I don't know what you're talking about here. You're going to have to break this down. Help us understand. And never did that happen. Nobody ever questioned it, and no one ever questioned it, because when he said Gehenna, everybody knew what the hell he was talking about. Now, when you talk about the fire never quench, right? The worm never turning, is full of fire and maggots. That was Gehenna. That was the and watch this. This is something else that a lot of Christians miss, is that when Jesus was crucified, and he was crucified the day before a Sabbath, he had to be taken down, and Joseph of Arimathea stepped up and gave him a borrowed tomb. Why was this important? Because if Jesus didn't have a tomb for himself, or a borrowed tomb that he was able to utilize, then that meant that his body would have been tossed into Gehenna, where the fire is never quenched and the worm is never turned. Now, that would have been a point of shame for Jesus and his family, for him to have died a pauper's death, which is why the borrowed tomb is so important. But again, the whole thing about hell as a concept, as a construct, this all came from Dante's Divine Comedy, for which Dante himself was excommunicated for, but later the church found value in adding this to the story, to say this is what happens when you don't obey God. You're going to go to this place of eternal conscious torment. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to say about hell, is that if you think about this, in the law of conservation, in quantum physics, it says that energy is neither created nor destroyed. The energy that you and I are, Malachi, has always existed and will always exist, right? So sorry.
You're good.
Yeah. So if this energy always existed billions of years and exists outside of time, in other words, it will always exist, why then would a just and loving God judge this energy to a place of eternal conscious torment or eternal reward based on what is a blip? Not even a blip. I mean, just a slice, a sliver of time. Where is the justice in that? Where's the fairness in that? Where is the love in that? And that, that was the whole thing about hell. And just, if you think about it, and you can go and visit hell right now. It's a state park outside of Jerusalem. It's been cleaned up. It's been beautified. It's grassy, has trees. Last time I was in Israel, I visited it. So I can say that I've been literally to hell and back.
Your insight, your insight and understanding in your teaching, I think, is far greater than you probably really understand it is for people. Being equipped and being able to put things into words that they can't. Not everyone. There's so many theologians that are out there, especially on YouTube, that haven't even stepped into seminary. So they recite and reiterate a lot of American, Western, Christian evangelical. It's not even Orthodox. It's like evangelical ideas. And so keep going 100% with that. You have also authored a book. I'm not sure when you did the Deconstructing Religion, it was that, of course, that's probably after your bishopry, and then, throwing in the towel, handing that over. One question before you go to that. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just saying that when I wrote Deconstructing Religion, I was still hip deep in it, or not even hip deep, up to my neck in it. That I was dedicated. I was faithful. The thing that I was all about is that I said that religion was the enemy. That was where I was at the time. And so my take on it is that you can have Christ without religion. You can have church without religion. That was where I was then. Now I've since, transitioned and became, I became a universalist and inclusionist like Bishop Pearson. He was my inspiration for that phase in my faith and in my ministry. But then I left and I became atheist. But as I was saying to you when we spoke this morning, that I now consider myself anti-theist. And the reason why I say that is that energy is neither created nor destroyed. And I believe that basically over time, energy has the ability to aggregate and coalesce and become sentient. And I think that this is how we come to be. It basically, the energy of the universe decides that it wants to have a human experience. And so it transitions into a human form, and it becomes human, and it experiences the human experience. What happens after we die? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we become comets. Maybe we become stars. Maybe we become quasars, pulsars, black holes. Who knows? But that energy keeps going. That energy never dies, and that's proven mathematically through the law of conservation.
Oh, I love that, how you begin to speak on just energy in general. People thinking about energy from the standpoint of reincarnation, but it's still referring to me as just thinking about energy as itself, because it can be destroyed. Going back to, of course, you said you were knee deep, and whenever you're saying deconstructing religion, which was not even deconstructing Christianity.
Right.
If one thing is anti-theist, did you get a little bit more into what an anti-theist is?
Okay, so an atheist says that they believe nothing, that they have no overarching faith principle. An anti-theist says, okay, I may believe in something, but the whole theist construct or a deist construct is not what it is. And that's the thing, in my opinion, based on my experience, based on my research, there is no God. Not like what we're taught, not in the biblical Christian sense, but because energy is eternal, that there may be some overarching principle that guides this. There may be some guardrails around how energy is formed, how energy dissipates, how energy transforms, and that I hate to say intelligent design because I haven't gone back to that yet, but there's something. And so my co-host on Freeology Friday, Aaron Tomlinson, Aaron is big on consciousness. And so when we talk about how consciousness, energy, the universe, how they're all kind of they're interchangeable. So this whole consciousness thing, that maybe consciousness, the universe, the unified field of all energy, perhaps that is God.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying. I think, well, on the thing I do on my show on Wednesday, but it's redefining what God is, right? Because we said, here's the word God, and here's what God means, right? And then all of a sudden we say that's what God is, right? Versus the honest, AWE, like
Yep.
wonder,
Mhm.
something that we would, and to me, the collective consciousness, as we all agree, we begin to create what we would call whatever that is. It's like, how do we come up with language? How do we come up with words, individual words?
Mhm.
Where are we going into when it comes to the spiritual evolution, which is another thing I love to talk about. But
Yeah.
spiritual evolution, which is part of consciousness and conscious evolution, is something that says we may have to create new words or new understandings that don't exist, and we're entering into a space as God's ourselves creators or co-creators. We have the ability to create, right? To do, and I mean, this is a piece of technology that I think we come across that is really neat, right? It really is
Yeah.
functional, right? It's almost godlike. I need something to create this. That's where I'm thinking with this expanding or expansion of consciousness. That means it's forever existent. It's energy that we can dial into, pull into, right? Discover. I always would talk about the radio waves that were here on the planet. They existed, but it took time for our consciousness to catch up. Then we had to figure out how to manipulate Earth and formulate different things, principles, iron, gold, metal, electric force, electric communication, just to get to the point where we can take advantage of this little phone call that we have in here. You're in the emergency room, able to still dial in, right? And where I'm at, just so a person knows, it's me and Bishop we're able to have, and the expansion of consciousness where I'm at is that we are actually doing this conversation 100 years from now, and someone is reviewing where we are as a level of insight. Wow, that's where they were, or wow, this is where we can go. 100 years is everybody is on planet pretty much is gone. They don't care about half the stuff we do, but these things exist. And so tell me a little bit more about where you're at in terms of there's people out there, they're all over the different places in terms of their spiritual journey, which I believe the soul is a part of us and the spirit just is. And so we can connect and tap in and tune into enlightenment. Right. I think enlightenment is something that's forever expanding and growing, and we can reach certain places we call levels, right? And being able to be superhumans as we get into the levels of consciousness. We haven't even gotten into the super consciousness, subconscious, super conscious. I don't really take Bishop's crowd too far into that polymath and all that space. But the question for you now is kind of like, tell me where you are in terms of like, what do you feel you are, even if it's getting into the conscious and the cosmos and, coming, and how does the Bible, if it does relate, or biblical text or ancient text, even if it's not biblical, like.
Yeah. Well, this is what I say to everybody that's listening. First of all, embrace your journey. Your journey is your journey. Your journey is personal. It is unique to you, and don't let anyone steal that from you. That's number one. Number two, where I am now, I have no use for the Bible, not even as a historical document, because when you look at it from a historical document, that there is no anthropological, archaeological, or anything other than anecdotal evidence that anything that it says ever happened. Now, with that being said, I'm not knocking at people who use the Bible or people who read the Bible. If you look at it as a work of fiction, I look at it like Harry Potter, and it has just about as much value. But where you are on your journey is your space. That's your personal space, and don't let anyone begrudge you that. The other thing too, don't be afraid to ask questions. Question everything. One of the things that I did as a thought experiment, I had a great niece. She died at 10 years old from brain cancer. And that was a very pivotal moment in my life, because I'm thinking to myself, and so this was my thought experiment. I asked people, if you had God power for 24 hours, what would you do? I'm looking around here. I'm in the waiting room, in the emergency room, and I'm dealing with blood pressure issues. But there are people out here that have much worse stuff going on than me, right? And I have great empathy for them and what they're going through. But here's the thing. With my niece, she died of brain cancer, and it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't a good death. It was no child should have to go through that. No parent should have to bury their child like that. It was devastating for my nephew and his wife. It was absolutely devastating to everyone. It was devastating to my sister-in-law, which was her grandmother. All of that. So my thought experiment was, if you have God power for 24 hours, what would you do? And people will say, well, I'd end racism, or I'd have world peace, or I would feed all the hungry people. And all of those things are noble. You know what? For me, it was, I would go into every freaking children's hospital at least in America, and I'd heal all the babies. I'd heal every child, because no child deserves to be sick. You cannot come up with any, and this whole thing, well, God's ways are higher than ours, his thoughts are not ours, and all of that's bullshit. I cannot get down with that. My thing is that if I want my kids to put the trash out, I have to tell them, I want the trash out. Here's how I want it done. This is the time that it needs to be done. This is the day that it needs to be done. This is how the cans need to be arranged. Because if I don't give them the instruction, I can't hold them accountable. Now, if I just say, well, the trash didn't get put out, okay, now you guys are in trouble. Well, Dad, you didn't tell us anything about the trash. I know, but you have to understand, my ways are mysterious. You see what I'm saying? And so, anyway, my thought experiment was, if I had God power for 24 hours, I'd go in and heal every child, every sick child, every kid with cancer, every kid with cerebral palsy, every kid that's paraplegic, quadriplegic. I don't care. I would heal every baby. And in that, I said, now, this is what I would do if I had that power. Now, if God ostensibly has that power and doesn't do it, then that means I am far more moral than that God. I'm far more loving than that God. I'm far more just than that God. And that was a tough one. So that was one thing. And then I gotta share this with you. This is a funny story that when, in the wake of George Floyd and Tatiana Jefferson and Breonna Taylor and many people that were black people that were killed by police, I was very vocal about these things. And so I had all of these people in the quote unquote grace camp, which I think is the most disingenuous of Christian camps. They would say, oh, well, Derrick, stop talking about Black Lives Matter. Stop talking about racism. Stop talking about them. Just preach Jesus. Just preach love. And so I would back off. I'd back off for a minute. And then something else would happen and I'd speak out about it. So then I had this idea. I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a series of social media posts on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, and they involve the F-bomb, which I'm not going to say on your show. But I said, I put this out here, and all of these same people that were saying, they say, oh, well, you shouldn't talk about that, just preach Jesus and all of that. They came back to me and they said, oh, I can't believe that a man of God would use that kind of language. I can't believe a man of God would say the F-bomb and put it on Facebook where children can read it. And I said, okay, ladies and gentlemen, you have been the unwilling and unwitting participants in a thought experiment. In this thought experiment, I have demonstrated that more people are upset about the use of the word F than they are about black folks being killed. And the response from that, basically that was the beginning of the end for me. When that happened, it's like those two things, the death of my niece and a lot of the social justice issues that we were facing, and how the Christian community responded to them. There were people that I had spent time with, that I had broken bread with, that I had in my home, exposed to my family, and these people turned on me, and at that point I said, if these are the representatives of this God, you got a bad sales force, dude, and I can't rock with you anymore. And that was sort of that was kind of the end game for me.
Do you have any practices that you do in terms of like for meditation or any kind of personal or spiritual practices that you do, things you study, or in terms of as you go on this, what is it that is the person would say, okay, whether you pray or don't pray, or whether you how the evolution has turned, coming, because some of the people, here's what I'm saying, the context. Some people are in the inclusion side of it. And I'm here to tell you that Bishop, it was a chore whenever I began to talk to him about going and revisiting inclusion, because some people were doing the inclusion. It was a chore. And so, but he had already practices and started moving into some other things. And so my question is, since you don't need, because some people still like, okay, we believe in inclusion, or we believe that God is, Jesus has accepted everyone, but, so they still like to visit the church, but, or visit let's say, inclusive church or Unitarian church. So that's some of their spiritual practice. I don't attend church. But I do have some deep science-based spiritual practices, because I love it, and it's proven and it works. And I'm using a lot of technologies and tools and, apps and things, and getting more into, I got a vagus nerve device that I'm able to get that's going to tune your vagus nerve for, there's some really neat things as we merge in spirituality with science. And so my question to you is like, what do you do, or what is some of the things, if you could share, or, that allow you to connect?
Well, the first thing is mindfulness. Mindfulness just simply says, I'm being in the moment. So what do? I focus on my personal space. I focus on my breath. I focus on my body. I take an inventory of all of my physical assets. And I focus on those, and I send healing and light to those parts of my body. The second thing is that I practice positive affirmation. I speak goodness. I speak light. I speak pleasantness. I speak joy to myself, to the people that are closest to me. I try to begin my day with words of affirmation, and understanding, reflecting on my core values. What is it that gets me out of bed? What is it that motivates me? And then finally, I'm a lifelong martial artist. I've studied Taekwondo, I've studied Kempo, I've studied Wing Chun. I've been involved in JKD and the Warriors Way system. And so I'm deeply steeped in martial arts, and so practicing the forms, practicing some of the postures, that helps to keep me centered. Also, I'm very conscious about how my energy is invested. I want to make sure that there's a positive return on investment on my energy. So I only invest in positive people, and I only receive deposits from positive people. I reject anything negative. I pretty much tune it out. And so those are some of the things that I've done that help to keep me centered and grounded, and also in tune with the spiritual me.
Beautiful. Well, I appreciate you, brother, for your time, and for you there at the in the emergency room there, doing what you need to do and taking care of that.
Can I ask for one quick thing?
Absolutely.
I want to give this to everyone in the audience, and I've got a little bit of audience here, but and it's this: give thought to what you believe in. Most people don't think about what they believe in. They don't think about what they think. They don't think about their thoughts, and so that's the meta. A meta thought is a thought about a thought, and a meta belief is a belief about a belief. And at what you have to do is you have to give some time to think about that. Now, the reason why I want to bring this up, and this is going to be the most shocking thing that I say in this show, and it's this: if you found that there was no evidence for Jesus, how would that affect or impact your faith? And the reason I ask that is I challenge any person on this show, watching this show, to find one shred of anthropological or archaeological evidence for an historical Jesus. If you can find it, I'd love to hear it. My mind is open. I'm not closed off to say that this is impossible, but it simply doesn't exist. And why I say that is, if you don't have that talisman, then where is your faith grounded? Where is your faith rooted? What is the linchpin of your faith? And if you don't have that, then you may want to go back and revisit what you've been taught and what you believe.
Bishop always would say, talk about question your beliefs and how do those beliefs add to or subtract value to your life, right? And so he was on some of those things, but he couldn't necessarily publicly fully say some of those things. He would, but he would just add it, include it into a lot of different things, right? You know, and if a person was where they were, he would just allow them to be, you know, as far as shouting and dancing and all that. Been there, done that. And he could do that if he needed to do that. And, you know, questioning, as you said, talk about questioning Jesus. Heck, I think he was going as far as to say that you're even saying questioning Yeshua, right? Because we already know that Jesus is made up as far as we already fully know that.
Even Yeshua. I mean, if you want to go back to it, because again, I'm talking about empirical, anthropological, or archaeological evidence. In other words, that there was an artifact. It's so funny how people will say there's more evidence for Jesus existing than Julius Caesar. Well, Julius Caesar had, provisioning documents for when he crossed the Rubicon. And then I've heard people say, oh, well, there's more evidence for Jesus than George Washington. I'm like, you can go down to Mount Vernon and dig old George up. They're spurious and ridiculous arguments that people make to try to justify these things. And my thing is that if you just apply some thought to this, and that's the thing, most people, okay, we have a conscious mind and we have an autonomous mind. The conscious mind is the part that's the thinker. That's what causes creativity, what causes speech, what causes action, right? The autonomous is the part that just keeps us breathing, keeps our food digesting. And most people take the same approach to their faith as they do their autonomous mind. In other words, they don't give any thought to it. They just say, okay, that's the way it is. Well, no, that's not the way it is. Apply some thought to this, because if you apply some thought to it, you'll find that most of it does not withstand any measure of scrutiny. And I've always said, this is my last thing on this, is that if what you believe cannot withstand a simple Google search, it ain't worth believing.
That's a simple Google search, right? Miss Dorothy, Mindset Social. Miss Dorothy says, when here, I'll put this when anyone claim evidence for the historical Jesus, they always use the Bible as that evidence.
Okay, so let me give you something to do. Right, I love what Miss Dorothy said. Get a power strip. You know what a power strip is, right? Everybody out there, y'all know what a power strip is. It's got like multiple plugs in it. You plug it into the wall, so you can plug multiple things into it. So what you do is take the end of that power strip, the plug part that you would plug into the wall, and plug it into one of the outlets in the power strip, and then plug stuff into the power strip and see what happens. You're not going to get anything. Why? Because it has no source, right? So basically, when you say using the Bible to justify things, and I saw somebody mention Josephus, and you know the what they call the Testimonium Flavium. If you've done any homework, any ecumenical or theological homework, you'll find that the Testimonium Flavium, what is ascribed to prove the existence of Jesus, that may have been added by Eusebius, and that it's totally fabricated. Because when you take that out of context, or you take that the testimonium out of that particular passage, and then align what's before it and what's after it, it all makes sense. But if you add you put the testimonium in there, you're like, wait a minute, that's a disjointed statement. That's totally incongruent. It doesn't make any sense. So yes, Miss Dorothy, thank you for that.
Yes, absolutely. This is another Dorothy Inez, though. She says, but don't Christians justify Jesus rose from the grave by saying that's why you can't find the body, because he rose from the grave?
Yeah. Well, it's like you can't find the body of Mr. Spock either.
Right.
But according to Star Trek 2 or Star Trek 3, Spock rose from the dead. I mean, it's really a ridiculous argument. Again, if there is some, and that's the other thing too, when I talk about archaeological or anthropological evidence, if you go back and you look historically, there are all of these historians that are writing about stuff in the time that Christ ostensibly lived, and none of these people wrote anything. Now, surely, because if you ask your average M1A1 Christian, they'll say, well, Jesus is the most important person that ever lived. Okay, that's great. Then that means there should be ample historical documentation of his existence. But what they'll do is they'll try to reframe that, and they say, oh, well, he was just a simple Jewish carpenter. Why would anybody write about him? I said, no, guys, you can't have it both ways. It either he is the most important person or he isn't. And if he isn't, then again, it makes the basis of your faith spurious.
Yeah. Well, I think needing Jesus is one of the things when it comes to us as human beings. And I haven't really done a lot of study. I began some of it, but just in the sense of human consciousness and where us having to bring this life into context. The reason why we have religion, to me, is bringing it into context, right? This life, this experience, this expression, because there's probably levels of religion and belief before we just had actual science, right? Where we actually being able to apply our thought to testing and to be able to create or recreate something as almost like God figures. And so my thing is even if you don't have the quote unquote Jesus, what do you have, right? It's like you have you. Regardless, it's like you have you, and what you can do with that, I think is pretty powerful. This was a cool Universal Mystics in Christ. This person's really interesting, but the existence of a non-existence of a historical Yeshua wouldn't affect me at all. But cool. I only deal with the mystical, metaphysical aspects of life. It is my belief that Yeshua is a historical person. I could kind of go with that in the sense that if you have a person, right, you have Gandhi, right? You have that person. As far as what that person is how magical that person is, that set aside, just that person being a person within history, like there's this person in history, but then they become a savior or whatever. For me, it's like just because of the brazen up and coming into America, it's like I can align. That's what I'll say. I can align with that. Where it's like, okay, it's a character. But I think what's more powerful is what you can do with. It's not just a story, because even if it's just a story, because we have a lot of stories. What can we do with these? How do we apply these stories?
Who? Sorry.
I think one thing I'll say is that Carlton Pearson aligned himself. He really aligned himself with the stories, and he loved the stories and the historical aspect of these stories bringing something to life. Bringing something or adding value to life. The stories that add value.
Well, I saw Bishop in toward the end of his life, where he was beginning to explore energy and explore consciousness and things like that. And one of the holy grails of physics is what they call the unified field theory. In other words, physicists look for what they call a unified theory of everything, because there are some things like Newtonian physics handles gravity, but it doesn't handle quantum things very well, and Einsteinian physics handles celestial objects, cosmic objects well, but it doesn't handle the small, the very small things. And then quantum physics handles the very small things very well, but it doesn't handle things like gravity very well. So each of these things, they have mathematical proofs that basically say, okay, this is how everything works, but every one of them has a missing piece. So the holy grail of physics is this unified field. And what I think is that the unified field is this consciousness. It is this sentient energy. And I think that when we learn how to tap into that this is the Christ consciousness that everybody's looking for. And to be honest, you don't need Christ to have consciousness. All you need is to tap into the consciousness. You don't need a talisman. You don't need, an artifact or anything like that. You just simply say, okay, I am energy. Therefore, whatever energy is available in the universe, I should be able to tap into that. Now, I want to go back to something that the quote that you posted on. The person said, well, I believe that Yeshua was a real person. Well, I could say that I believe my dad was a billionaire. But if I don't have some anthropological evidence that concludes that he's a billionaire, then my belief is in vain. And that's the point of all of this, is that if you don't have, if you have, and people say, well, this is where faith comes in. But there's a thin line between faith and foolishness. So the thing is that make sure that what you believe in is well-founded. For example, I'm sitting in a chair. Now, I didn't ask this chair before I sat in it whether or not it can hold my 260 pounds. Didn't ask. I just sat in it. Why? Because I assume that the engineering has been done to make sure that this chair will hold me. Otherwise, if I sit in it, St. Francis may get sued if it breaks. Okay? So the thing is that if you have some foundation in fact, some foundation in reality, some foundation in something tangible, measurable, repeatable, then you can say, okay, this is something I can hitch my wagon to. But if you're hitching your wagon to something that you can't prove, you can't quantify, you can't measure, and it's certainly not repeatable, because it should, if something is that great, it should be universal, and no matter how many times you tap into it, you should get a 100% result. And you can't. There's not a person on here that says that they have a 100% prayer record. There's not a person that says they have a 100% healing record. Not a person here that says they have a 100% track record for raising people from the dead. It doesn't exist. So if you don't have something that's tangible, measurable, repeatable, then again, please, 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 pretty please. Now, and let me say this too before I go. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to think. I'm simply telling you to think.
Absolutely. That's what Bishop would always say, is like, I just want to tell people to think. One of the things that, because I get into materialism or when it comes to science. And then there's a lot of things that we have yet to discover. There's beauty into the unknown. The other thing was, I think the principle, someone said it, is there's principles, whether it would be a Bible or would be any other, the Tao, or, principles within life, within books, fiction or not, that it's like, we don't need the Bible to say thou shalt not kill. You know what I mean? But at the same time, we can still agree with that principle, right? And it just so happens to be in the Bible. But brother, I appreciate it, man. This has been a journey. I think that I still had some other questions. The last one I think I'll dig up here before we go. If you want, after this, you could still go back to these comments. This is both. There's some still on YouTube and they're on Facebook. And I know he does this as part of his who he is and part of his teachings, and on Facebook and YouTube himself. And so there was one, and it was talking about how do you feel about the Gospel of Thomas?
The Gnostic Gospels, in which Thomas is one of them, basically dealt with knowledge and understanding, and according to the Gnostics, that salvation is achieved by knowledge, by understanding, and not by faith. I think that if you're getting closer, if you're trying to find hot, warm, or cold of truth, that the Gnostic Gospels are probably warmer, but I still don't ascribe much value to them any more than anything else biblical. It's mostly, how can I say this? It's anecdotal. There are some principles that may be good for living in it. But one of the, and here's the other thing too about the Gnostic Gospels, is that I think that the early church fathers wanted to keep the Gnostic Gospels out of the hands of people because they didn't want people knowing, and that's the whole point of excluding the Gnostic Gospels. I think the Gnostic Gospels, the word gnosis, Gnosis, talks about knowing. It agnostic means to not know or to not be certain, and the Gnostics were pretty certain about the power of consciousness and the power of knowledge. So I would say that on the hot, warm, cold scale, that the Gnostics are probably on the warm part, whereas the rest of it's all cold.
Yes, sir. That's I totally get what you mean. I think too, a lot of us, after so many years and so long, it's just, I think as more people, because the thing about spirituality, I think we will be that no matter what. That's part of the human makeup. This discovery and mysticism is part of the human makeup, right? Even within some levels of science, before you get to the physics, engineering, within science, you're going to be in the meta, you're going to be in the thought, like, I wonder if, like, is this? And then pulling that, it takes special people to pull those ideas into a physical form or reality, right? To be able to take those ideas and a lot of things within the context of whether it be scripture or whether it be something spiritual from history. There's a lot of, as you would say, anecdotal, but just a lot of feeling and emotions involved. But I think feelings and emotions can be powerful. That's how you can
Absolutely.
How you can really create some things. But brother, I appreciate it. I think the people loved it this evening. Thank you for, being there in the emergency room. I'm going to push energy for you to, that blood pressure to come down, brother. And I know you know how to do that. Our bodies are weird and how you do all the right things, but yet though they still can respond in a certain way. And so I appreciate you for your time. Thanks everyone here for tapping in and tuning in. And the last thing I'll say is they are working to get foundation stuff together, Carlton Pearson Foundation stuff, and figuring out what this looks like, what it is. And so if anyone out there, you have some ideas on some of the things foundationally speaking, because we have his history, and of course we can produce more of his content and some of those things. But my biggest thing and his biggest thing, Carlton Pearson, because I was working with him directly, and I believe his biggest things that he really enjoyed were you. And the reason why I'm continuing this and bringing guests that I feel personally that are adding value to our ideas, to our thought processes. I'm not just looking for famous people that have books or things that I'm looking for people that add value to our lives. And so I appreciate you, sir. I appreciate you for being able to come out. And I'm going to post this here, and we have it. And thank you guys. Until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday, 8:30. Have some more shows planned, and have a good one, guys.
Thanks a lot, Malachi.
Yes, thank you.
I am connected to a source that